Side Door Social Justice Hub, and we basically are a group of people from lots of different organisations, all united by work in social justice. We have people from who work with refugees, we have community organisations, we have a whole range, and we try to have in this space conversations about social justice. Intimate conversations. They don't necessarily need to be huge attendance, but the idea is to bring back the idea of conversation, face to face, not online, not diatribes, not fighting, just chatting. We're very brave. We're bringing an Palestinian, I'm an Israeli, sorry, and a Jewish Canadian to talk, and this is often something that is quite hair-raising for some people and can be a bit confronting, but I've been told that they're going to behave.
Never. I don't know who told you that.
Thank you. And we have Anne Fink, who is going to be moderating and questioning and asking, and yeah, it should be interesting. So thank you. And
I'm not going to stand here. I'll just sit because I'm old. So just, but speak. Oh, you can't hear. Okay, so we'll go up here. Make it easy. So just to kick off, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Samah. She's our own local heroine, Samah Sabawi, who is the playwright who wrote a very controversial play, Tales of a City by the Sea, which ultimately ended up in I think it's fifth formers, the 16, 17-year-olds in Victoria who are doing the drama curriculum, now not having to read Shakespeare. How about that? Because there's to be no sex, no violence, no ethnic divisions, nothing that approaches any area which might bring discomfort. This is Samah's contribution to Victorian education.
You can all thank me later.
But the play, as Samah will tell you about, which is part of this anthology, is only one part of her major contribution to literature. She's a wonderful poet, and if any of you ever have a chance, please listen to her reciting her own poetry. It will bring tears to your eyes. And I won't go further. She'll tell you more about herself. She's a Gazan, she's an Australian, and she's a Canadian. So how about that for different levels of diasporan identity? We want to welcome our guest, Stephen Orlov, who comes from Montreal, born in Boston, and who is a playwright. He's the director of the Canadian Playwrights Guild.
No, I've served on the executive of Playwrights Canada.
And he has had the play that's included in this anthology, Sperm Count, was first performed in London in 1998, and it was part of a trilogy.
2001.
Yeah. And 2000, sorry, I was thinking of another one. Sorry, 2001, and it's part of a trilogy of diasporan Israeli, Jewish plays, yes, on this topic of Jewish Palestinian relations. It's a play that deals this particular time with identity, including the biological aspects of identity, and it is in itself a fascinating piece of work. But I'll let Stephen tell you more about his life and work as we go along. Perhaps Samah would like to begin by telling us something about the other plays as well as her own.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank the Side Door Social Justice Hub and the Australian Jewish Democratic Society for hosting us. Thank you, Savan, for doing all the legwork, and thank you for Anne for agreeing to moderate our panel. And thanks to everyone here for coming and for joining in this conversation. I want to also say a special thanks to Multicultural Arts Victoria for helping us with the promotion of this event. Before I begin, I also would like to acknowledge the traditional honors of the land on which we stand. and to pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as the elders from other communities who may be here tonight. Today is the last day of National Reconciliation Week in Australia. It's been 25 years since the Australian High Courts passed the landmark Mabo decision, a decision that brought to an end the myth of terra nullius, a Latin expression which I've just learned how to pronounce, which means land belonging to no one. And this expression was ingrained in the law. Terra nullius has enabled white Australia to claim Aboriginal land and to make invisible the presence of the indigenous population on it. Sounds familiar. Palestinians too were made invisible within the myth of a land without a people. The Mabo decision 25 years ago was an important step in recognizing the unique rights that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have to land and waters according to traditional laws and customs, paving the way for the legal recognition of land rights known today as native title. Of course, much still needs to be done, and national reconciliation in Australia, as in Palestine, cannot be achieved without eradicating the systematic structural inequalities that give privilege to some while denying rights to others. We are still a long way, both here and there, from reaching this goal. But this doesn't mean we can't keep our eye on the distant dream of getting there someday. It doesn't mean we stop imagining how beautiful a future can be. It doesn't mean we lose our vision and our creativity. And that's what artists do. That's what we as Jewish and Palestinian playwrights have done in this anthology. So let me begin by introducing you to the multiplicity of voices in this anthology that we're very proud of. Double Exposure, Plays of the Jewish and Palestinian Diaspora, has 7 plays in it. 3 written by Palestinian playwrights, 3 by Jewish playwrights, and 1 a collaboration of both Jewish and Palestinian writers. There are 2 introductions to this anthology, one written by Palestinian-American playwright Betty Shamia, and the other by American Jewish playwright Karen Hartman. Both, like all the plays and the reflections in the reflection section that follows each play, are absolutely worth the read. The first of our 7 plays in this collection is Bitter Enders, a play by award-winning Palestinian-Irish playwright Hannah Khalil. Hannah opens her play with this. We are inside a house in East Jerusalem. There is a visible line drawn in chalk on the floor. One side of the line is empty of people, but furnished. On the other side of the line is a basic kitchen and a family. Hannah Khalil, in Reflections, explains how the idea for this play was inspired by real-life events in Jerusalem. She writes, "The situation of a Palestinian family forced to share their home with settlers seemed like such a dramatic and ripe topic for a piece of theater." The title of her play, Bitter Enders, as she explains, is taken from the name of a faction of the fighters in the later stages of the Second Boer War. She writes, "The Bitter Enders, as their name suggests, were the last men fighting. They'd go on and on no matter what, willing to fight to the bitter end. All Palestinians are bitter enders by another name, fighting in spite of everything, against all the odds, for their nation, for equality, for dignity, and for humanity, for their very existence." The second play in this anthology is Facts by Canadian Jewish playwright Arthur Milner. Facts is a murder mystery set in the West Bank in an interrogation room in an Israeli army facility. In his reflections, Arthur offers us a glimpse into his past. He writes, "My father had been a Zionist from an early age." Later on he says, "In my youth, Begin was an occasional visitor to our home." Yet despite his upbringing, Arthur Milner grew critical of the state of Israel and the injustice imposed on the Palestinian people. He came to recognize that his privilege and stature affords him voice, and with that comes responsibility. So he began to write plays tackling the Palestine-Israel conflict. Asked about the challenges that he faced on his journey, Arthur responds with this: "It was hard to get a production. I distrust it when playwrights say, people are afraid to do my work, but I think Canadian and American artistic directors are gutless when it comes to doing plays critical of Israel. The third play in the anthology is The Peacemaker by Canadian Jewish playwright Natasha Greenblatt. And this is what Natasha had to say about the inspiration to write this play in her reflections. She writes, "When I was a kid, Israel seemed like the happy ending to the young adult Holocaust that I ravenously consumed. When I went to university in Montreal, at a school where students rioted when Benjamin Netanyahu came to speak, I realized there was a lot more that I needed to learn. So after the 2009 attacks on Gaza, Natasha Greenblatt went to Israel on birthright. While there, she wanted to spend time to learn about Palestine, and so she volunteered to teach drama with an NGO based in Nablus in the West Bank. Her experiences on the Strip and a story she heard from a Palestinian-Canadian woman on the bus when she was returning home inspired her to write this play." Natasha writes, "Some people have told me this play is balanced, a compliment. Others have told me it is unbalanced, a criticism. I railed against both. I have tried to convey my experience, and my experience was not balanced. The situation is not balanced. Life is not balanced. And the more I thought about it, I wondered if plays should be balanced, and what balance in this context even means." The fourth play in the anthology is Sabra Falling by Palestinian-American playwright Ismail Khalidi. Ismail was born in Beirut, and he was raised in the US. He resides today in Chile, where he is an artist in residence at Teatro Amal. He writes Sabra Falling, which is a play that takes place in the Sabra refugee camp in August of 1982, during the last days of heavy Israeli bombardment of Beirut. In his reflections, Khalidi writes, "I was born to politically active Palestinian parents in Beirut in 1982, a mere 2 months after the massacres at Sabra and Shatila. I do not have memories of Beirut then. Before my first birthday, my immediate family was able to escape the city, and in 1983 we came to the US. We were lucky." Yet despite having no memories of Beirut, Ismail writes, "I grew up with the stories and the characters of those years constantly swirling about me, recounted at dinner tables or at bedtime, recalled in moments of sadness, in heated political discussions, in sober historical and political analysis, or in bursts of laughter at shared memories a relative or journalist from the Beirut days would share during a visit to our Chicago home. Beirut, like Jerusalem and Jaffa, Damascus, Cairo, Amman, and Haifa, was and is an integral part of the Palestinian story, of my own story, of my family's story." The fifth play in the anthology is Sperm Count by Stephen Orlov, my co-editor of this anthology, who's here today. The play is set in Montreal shortly after the 1991 Persian Gulf War. Stephen was born in Boston, and he was raised in an immigrant working-class family. Although he didn't learn much Hebrew, having quit his Hebrew classes straight after his bar mitzvah, he writes in Reflections, "The biblical and historical stories of how our ancestors had fought oppression, reinforced by childhood nightmares about the Holocaust, left its marks on my psyche. Support for Israel was a given, a birthmark of the tribe, though we rarely discussed politics around the dinner table. But growing up, Stephen began to question conventional wisdom on so many social issues, both at home and abroad. And I will let him speak more about his play, Sperm Count, when he comes to the podium after me, so I will leave that to him. But he did meet with many challenges that he has encountered in the mounting of his production, which I'm sure he'll elaborate on. The sixth play in this anthology is Tales of a City by the Sea, my play. The play is a love story set mostly in Gaza against the backdrop of the siege and the war of 2008-2009. It's inspired by the strength and defiance of ordinary people in Palestine who, despite the horrific war, siege, and brutality of the Israeli occupation, insist that life is worth living and love is worth celebrating. There were many challenges faced in mounting this production in Australia and in Palestine. Funding, casting, all of these issues here. But for my production in Gaza and in the West Bank, the challenges were bigger. Siege, F-16s dropped on creative spaces, losing family members, loved ones, and friends, losing freedoms under curfew and military incursions. The play was never mounted in Gaza because of the war in 2014, and it had one season in the West Bank at Al Rawat Theatre. Other challenges in mounting my production here in Australia included a campaign by B'nai B'rith ADL to have the play removed from the Victorian Certificate of Education playlist in 2016. It wasn't. And the play went on to win 2 Drama Victoria Awards for Best Production for VCE and Best Publication for VCE, as well as a nomination for the Green Room Awards for Best Independent Production category. And I think these are all signs of changing times. The final play in our anthology is 21 Positions, a cartographic dream of the Middle East, written by Palestinian playwrights Abdel Fattah Abu-Sroor, American Jewish playwright Lisa Schlesinger, and American Jewish playwright Naomi Wallace. This play was commissioned by the Guthrie Theatre, and this is what the writers of this play had to say in their reflections section in the book. 21 Positions, we hope, challenges division, occupation, and oppression in its practice of writing across borders and with its power of a collective imagination. End quote. Now, as we move towards Q&A after Stephen speaks now, I hope that our anthology and that the nature of the word an act of collaboration between Jewish and Palestinian writers, I hope that it will raise many questions. We want to crack open the conversation and to instigate a serious discussion about topics that others would rather brush aside. When is a collaboration between a Jewish and a Palestinian writer halal, kosher, an act of co-resistance and co-struggle, and when is it an act of normalization and an act of whitewashing of reality? Is there such a thing as presenting balanced collection of plays? Is there such a thing as a balanced play? Is this conflict even balanced? Can we actually use the word conflict, or should we be saying occupation, as one audience member at the Montreal Writers' Festival suggested? No one knows better than writers that language is a minefield. But if well crafted, language can be a powerful tool to communicate, entertain, move, organize, and resist. The writers in this anthology have weaved with their words powerful stories that we hope will open the eyes, move the hearts, and awaken the conscience.